I had them on line before I dial up. How they claiming they on top and I'm a mile up. I had them on line before I dial up. How they claiming they on top and I'm a mile up. I know the wall's closing in, but don't you dare give up now. Poe believed in me, pull up through some bucks down. Todd told the valet pull the truck round. Push the line after we drew it, it's just us now. Would you believe me if I told you my granny told me she prayed this? Then booked the surgery just to pull me out of the basement. Right back where I started, nothing to show for a facelift. Got pushed playing Walter White and Davis, never felt so dangerous. The type of power they can't quantify. And name the best from my region, you gotta utter mine. Think of who really putting on, you never come to mind. Rapping like your Spotify, tap you rappers compromise. Yeah, no need to panic, just paint the canvas. If you can feel the static, you're too close, find your balance. Embed the revolution for they prohibition bandwidth. Blood trickle from the leaders he was planning. I had them all line before I dial up. How they claiming they on top when I'm a mile up. I had them all line before I dial up. How they claiming they on top when I'm a mile up. Bought at that flight to Amsterdam. Well, my accountant and minus my family found out too and didn't like it. You're not in this alone. What Dale said and I thought he was biased. Then I got a Venmo that said copy the finest. Before my foolishness settled in. Recorded a whole tape before we got to Berlin. This close to giving up and now never again. Don't overlook the work and come expecting to win. In the end, my word, never put nothing over the squad. Got it right up under their nose and try the facade. Off the cliff with broken wings, I'm aware of the odds. Enough faith for us all, I'm the one for the job. Most days, catching sun rays, baby, look like the front page. Overthinking what they might say, have it your.
What's up, good people? It's Jackie Luqmans.
And I am Uncle Baba Luqman, the living myth.
The living myth.
Yeah.
How does that go?
When the world was in darkness, and
darkness was ignorance, along came Ra.
Yeah, along came Ra.
Yeah. That's our little inside joke with each other. We are the living myths.
Yep.
Baba Luqman, Jackie Luqman, and welcome to another episode of Luqman Nation on Black Power Media.
The most dangerous show on social media, and now on the most dangerous platform on social media. Like to welcome everybody out there for joining us on this Dope Friday.
Date
night Friday. And I know that we started it off Dope Friday at 11, but this morning at 11 with the Black Myth podcast, I believe. And so, and then here we are, second installment. Then after us comes Dr. CBS. Then after Dr. CBS comes the Renegades.
Yes.
They will be on. So, we got all this lined up. We'd like to thank all of you out there for supporting us for the Remix Morning Show.
Oh, my God.
Now, it was something because I was so used to getting up and, getting prepared for the morning show that, I jumped up this morning and I was like, oh, my God, look what time it is. Got to go down there and get on the remix. And then I was like, no, it's Friday. So, no, there is no morning remix today.
There is no Remix Morning Show today. And when you hopped up, I was like, dude, come on now. Get back in this bed.
Right.
My warm spot is gone. You moved my furnace. Come back.
Yeah, I'm saying like, wow. So anyway, but we do have Dope Friday. And so anyway, before we get into anything, let's hit that like button. Let's hit subscribe. And the bell so you can get the notifications for when any of us will be back on. So you'll get that. Join. And I think we have it's April, so we're trying to get 175 patrons. I think we're close to that. So if you haven't become a patron, please become one. Share this video, share the content. Be conduits of this knowledge that what?
No, I'm laughing at the comment.
Okay.
Y'all know me too well. I don't care that you're eating avocado, Leah, but that's okay. I don't like avocados. More avocado for you. You can have them all.
I don't understand why you don't like avocados, but okay. But speaking of, so getting back to what I was saying. No, I don't understand why you don't like. I love avocados.
When did this happen? happened?
Oh, come on. You know I like avocado. I always liked avocados. I've been eating avocados long, even before I met you. I like avocado. I don't buy them like that, but but yeah, my Spanish friends, we used to get down all the time with avocados. But anyway, so check out the Patreon, and so check out, like I said, we got Black Myth Podcast, and all these other things that's coming. The Remix Morning Show will start up again on Tuesday, and if you missed any of Black Power Media's content, videos and shows, they got the rewind weekend, I believe, where you can rewatch, it's all there. So, you just go there. Then you got blackpower.org, which is the website, where there's some merch and, all the other kind of stuff, stuff. So anyway, again, so we're talking about avocados, and this is the thing. Trust me. I stopped smoking, y'all. Now look, I was a smoker, heavy smoker, and I stopped smoking. I think I'm like 2 months in now.
Yes.
Probably about 2 months in.
And I'm so proud of you.
Right. Thank you. So, and I feel the benefits already, so I stopped smoking, and I'm trying to get on this health kick, with people like me, you got to bring me along slowly because, there's people that's like, there's vegans out there, and and everybody's been, and I know it's for my own benefit. Everybody's been like, giving me advice, and, you should do this and you should do that, and you should eat this way, and folks, trust me. I appreciate all of it because I know you're looking out for your uncle. I understand that. You're looking out for Uncle Baba. But a guy like me got to be drawn along slowly. So what I mean by that is I stopped smoking. I stopped eating a lot of the bad stuff. I ain't cut it all out. But one of the things we did is the fact that, well, you have already done it, but I started incorporating more greens in my diet. Started taking a little bit of care of that. But we ordered the sea moss from Kalonji, right?
Yeah, from Community Movement Builders, which is the organization that our comrades over at Renegade Culture run. So they sell sea moss. Super sea moss, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, not the base level sea moss. No. This is super. In fact, I got it in my drink right now. I got a concoction here that well, it's like Lil Wayne said, what's in my cup it's my cup. So what's in my cup is my business. So anyway, sea moss and other green, we got superfoods and all this other kind. So anyway, the old man is trying to do something here. It's not about trying to dial back the clock. He's just trying to patch the holes in the wall and all this other kind of stuff. So anyway, Jackie, what's been happening?
Yeah, so there has been a lot that has been going on in the world, and as I don't know what you would call it. I think that most radical people operate on like the same sort of wavelength, right? I think we pay attention to the same stuff, that the same stuff alerts us,
right?
Even though we might see it from a different perspective, we're looking at the same stuff because we know how the system works,
right? Because
we've been in this for a minute. Those of us who have been in it for a minute, right? So we kind of see the same things, and we, we're peeping things as they're going on in the world. And I think that maybe because there is so much going on,
right,
and for a whole lot of reasons, I think we don't always have really like principled, intricate conversations about some of the issues that affect our people on the continent, and particularly our people on the continent. And so we want to start this discussion with some comments from Dr. John Henrik Clark.
Look, okay.
Because I think we have to frame this in the right perspective. And it's something that he says in his comments that are very important to the way we're going to carry out the rest of this discussion. So let me see if I can cue this video up and show you guys
roll that
what you have to do is take a holistic look. Not only at your position in the world, but your potential in the world. You have to learn how to convert everything into an instrument of liberation or leave it alone. You have to realize there was no Greek fraternities and sororities until they were introduced to secret African societies. People get all dewy-eyed over something that was imposed on them in order to control them, without understanding that that's another imperial effort. So it bothers me, and although I have good personal friends who are Muslim, that not a single Muslim scholar have dealt with that 1,000 years of African independence before slavery and how the Arabs from the north systematically destroyed these nations. It did not occur. 1591, from Morocco, an army was launched against these great independent nations in inner West Africa. These were great states. And because of poor communication between African and African, there was enough armies in these states to march down to the coast and to drive every slave trader into the sea. But the communication between African and Africa was so poor. Even today, the East Africa is not too clear about what's happening in West Africa. And nobody knows what's happening in North Africa, because the conspiracy to hold on to Africa is happening in South Africa and in North Africa. So the whites in South Africa willing to play a part, and the pseudo-whites in North Africa willing to play a part. In all this world, you have no friends. But if there are a billion of you on the face of this earth, scattered all over the world, what do you need with a friend other than yourself?
Now, Ashe. Now that video was from a speech Dr. Clark made in the 90s sometime, clearly after he had suffered blindness, if you had not noticed. Just a couple of things he said I think are so important. Before we get into that, I just want to point out really quickly that we do have a new member since we started the broadcast tonight. Garen, let me make sure I got this right. Garen Jensizian. Thank you very much, Garen, for becoming.
You get the membership power fist.
You get the Baba Luqman power, black power fist. Thank you for becoming a member. All right. Don't let him be the last one. Share this video, invite your friends. Look, let's get into this conversation. A couple things that Dr. Clark said that are very, very important. At the end, he said, listen, after all this stuff that has happened to Africa, you have no friends. Then he said, but if there are a billion of you in the diaspora around the world, right, what friends do you need if you have yourself? That's the first important thing. But then something else he said at the beginning of his comments there was that we have to convert everything into an instrument of liberation or leave it alone.
Yep.
That to me is really important in how we talk about how countries that are absolutely targets of U.S. imperialism in the world, countries like Russia and China,
right,
how we talk about the way they operate on the continent of Africa sometimes that's not beneficial to African people to African liberation. And this seems to be a really difficult conversation for people to have. I think, this is just my opinion. You know how I am with my opinions.
Yeah, you're entitled to it.
But I think the reason people have a problem with this conversation is because they don't really understand what imperialism really is.
I agree with that. I do.
Okay, so here's our attempt at explaining what imperialism is, and also by extension, what colonialism is. I think this is very important. And usually I kind of hate Wikipedia.
Right.
But this time, Wikipedia actually kind of got it right, because
it's not. I mean, it's not the best source, but it's not always wrong.
Not always wrong. Not the best source, but I think for today they're actually pretty good, because they actually draw on some sources, that we are all familiar with, that we should all be familiar with, and that is our friends V.I. Lenin and Karl Marx. If you didn't know, yesterday was the 150th birthday of Vladimir Lenin.
Looks like he just turned 20.
I know, it just hasn't aged a day. So, according to Wikipedia, and it's not actually according to Wikipedia, it's actually according to the definition of imperialism that they cite comes from Vladimir Lenin. And Lenin describes imperialism as the highest stage of capitalism.
It's monopoly capitalism, right?
Basically, it's monopoly capitalism. He says it's the function of financial capital in generating profits from imperialist colonialism. That's an incredibly important phrase, as the final stage of capitalist development to ensure greater profits. Now, they go on to say that the essay is a synthesis. The essay, meaning the essay Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, that's actually an essay that Lenin wrote in 1917. That's a synthesis of his modifications and developments of economic theories that Karl Marx formulated in Das Kapital. Marx wrote Das Kapital in 1867. Now, if you read this Wikipedia page, if you have not read Das Kapital, or if you have not read Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, this is a good start. Believe it or not, this Wikipedia page is a pretty good start to give you an idea of the concepts that are that we're talking about here. This is very important in this discussion, because the idea of imperialism is that in order for capitalism to generate greater profits, let me see if I can highlight this for you. Yes. In order for capitalism to generate greater profits than the home market can yield, the merging of banks and industrial cartels produces finance capitalism, and the exploitation and investment of capital to countries with underdeveloped economies is required. In turn, such financial behavior leads to the division of the world among, what do you say, monopolist business companies and the great powers. We often talk about the great power conflict between European nations that were previous colonizers of Africa, and now China and Russia. They're in competition with each other. They are the great powers. But make no mistake, Russia and China are targets of U.S. imperialism. And we're going to try to get into this in a minute. So, moreover, in the course of colonizing undeveloped countries, business and government eventually will engage in geopolitical conflict over the economic exploitation of large portions of the geographic world and its populaces. Therefore, imperialism is the highest or advanced stage of capitalism, requiring monopolies of labor and natural resource exploitation and the exportation of financial capital rather than goods to sustain colonialism, which is an integral function of said economic model.
And we know that one of the earliest examples of that was the Roman Empire.
Exactly. So when we think of imperialism, it is important to think of imperialism inextricably tied with capitalism. And you can't just think of imperialism as like a country that has a bunch of colonies, right? Which is how a lot of people think of empires. They think of the British Empire in that way.
Well, that's one reason why a lot of people who defend American expansionism, they're always quick to tell you that America's not an empire based upon that.
Right, because America doesn't have quote unquote colonies, but Puerto Rico though, Guam though,
Washington D.C. though.
How about yeah? Okay, so do you see
black places everywhere in this country though?
Yeah, every black neighborhood is a colony. Yeah, so when you think of imperialism as an extension of capitalism, an escalation of capitalism, in which an empire can't make any more money. They cannot make any more profit within their borders. So they go to another country and exploit the resources and the people and extract the profits from there.
And eventually, when that's done, they go into space, which is what we're seeing now.
Right. Okay.
I mean, Mars is the next target for this type of exploitation.
Exactly. So I hope that's a little bit clearer. So then there's this other phrase that was in this definition that is very, very important, and that is exploitation colonialism. Now, this is actually, when we were researching for this show, this is actually the first time I saw this Wikipedia page. And I think this is a pretty good definition of this new phase of colonialism, right? Because we always think of colonialism as, like I said, British Empire with, having a colony in India, or India was a colony of
like Britain. The old paradigm of the British to French. And,
right. Yeah. Well, no, that's not what this is now. This is what Wikipedia is calling exploitation colonialism, but what you and me might call neocolonialism.
Right.
Okay, so
but to me, all colonialism was exploitative.
That's true.
Right.
That's absolutely true. It's just physically in a different form. Right. So exploitation colonialism, according to the smart people at Wikipedia, says there is the national economic policy of conquering a country to exploit its population as labor and its natural resource as raw material. The practice of exploitation colonialism contrasts with settler colonialism, the policy of conquering a country to establish a branch of the metropole or the motherland, meaning there is no government of the mother country in another country. A reason for which a country might practice exploitation colonialism is the immediate financial gain produced by the low-cost extraction of raw materials by means of native people, usually administered by a colonial government. And this goes on and on to talk about, the geopolitics of imperialist power and all of this good stuff. I think it's a really good... For Wikipedia, I think it's a really good definition.
Well, yeah, and I think it also does a very good job of distinguishing between different. I mean, it's all exploitative, but distinguishing between the different nuances of exploitation.
Right.
So you got the transatlantic slave trade, which was definitely exploitative colonialism. Pardon me, as opposed to other forms of colonialism and imperialism and those type of things. But imperialism, as we've been stating, it hasn't died away. It's just it just merged into different forms and
right. And I mean, there are a whole bunch of books that if you really want to, and you really should, you really have to dig deep into these topics of imperialism and exploitation, especially on the continent. And, look, folks, if you've got your book recommendations, drop them in the chat so everybody can have access to that information. But I think it was important that we started this conversation about Russia and China and their relationship with Africa.
And because I think before we go there, I think we need to understand, we want to let the people in the chat know why we start off like this. Because Jackie and I was having a conversation, and we're not going to bore you with the conversation, but what we basically said is that we can't assume that everybody understands these terms, that everybody understands the jargon that we in these circles of ours use. And I think that so Jackie and I said that we were going to incorporate some of the basic language or jargon or understanding that a lot of people take for granted. But there's we have people coming into this struggle every day. And Black Alliance for Peace, we have new people coming in all the time. And so we just can't assume that they understand these things or they know anything or they read the books that you read and all this other kind of stuff. And I think that being human nature that it is, that sometimes people are shy to get into debates that they feel like they're not equipped for. So, because sometimes the initiated, we can be brutal when it comes to going up against people who we feel is not where we're at. So, so we said that what we were going to do was that we were going to basically have these kind of 101 type lessons, which we hope that and we're glad that you indulge us in it. Of course, a lot of you, this is basically child's play, but we have a lot of folks who we always say lurk out in the chat. We might we have our regulars that's in the chat and y'all chopping it up. But then we got this large section of folks that's in the chat lurking around, and we can't assume that those people understand what we're talking about or understand the jargon or the ideology and all this stuff, but they want to be involved. So we're trying to facilitate that.
Yeah, and I think look, I always say there's room for everybody in the struggle. There is something for everybody to do in the struggle. Not everybody has the patience or the ability, nor should everybody do these 101 kind of discussions. Everybody doesn't have to do this, but somebody has to be willing to do it.
Right.
So
now, one of the things one of the things that we was talking about, because we opened up with Dr. Clark.
We did.
And that is actually one of my favorite statements that, out of the many statements that Dr. Clark has made over the course of his of his life, but that we have no friends. Now, you and I got into because a lot of our show ideas come out of the discussions that you and I just had. We'll be in the kitchen and we'll talk about something and then we'll flush it out. And it don't even be intended to do a show on. It's just our conversation.
No.
And then we would like to share that. So a lot of this is not, and then we go to the lab and say, well, maybe some, other people might be interested. But what we were saying is that, this thing about China relationship and Russia's relationship on the continent of Africa, and what I felt, I'm not going to, you talk for yourself, but what I felt was the trap of falling into this having these blinders on when it came to China, when it came to Russia, when it came to other, because they're not imperialist in the definition that we know it to be. Is their involvement any less harmful, or is their involvement any less exploitative? So and I see that a lot of people who whose politics may lean towards that side have a tendency to want to give them a pass for certain things. Now, somebody sent something to me in my inbox who lives in Ohio, who said that there's Chinese a company out there that is that isn't operating in good faith with the labor movement out there. Now, we talk about Jeff
Bezos.
We talk about Amazon. We talk about a lot of these other things. But this person said that where they live at, the Chinese company out there is very anti-union and anti. So and you and I were talking about that had this information been about an Amazon or been about any American company, then we have to. What I'm saying, we'd be jumping all on this,
right?
But what if it is a Chinese company and you're a Marxist-Leninist, or you're this and you're that, or it's a Russian company? So I think a lot of times that we have to be careful of our own biases, because I know for me, my first allegiance is to the African. It's not my allegiance isn't to China. My allegiance definitely ain't to the United States. My allegiance isn't to Russia or any. When it comes with relation to Africa and its resources, my allegiance is first to the African. So and what's best for the African, because whatever is best for the African is going to be best for me.
I mean,
eventually, that's the way we're moving towards. Right. That's the way we would like to move towards anyway.
Right.
And so we came up with a few of stories that we there used to be a segment called
We need to have a segment called
yeah. So we got a few stories together that didn't include America. Now this include Russia, China, and other things. And and these stories is like So let's look at that and see what the fuck is going on here.
Are we doing a larger segment of what the fuck is going on in the world?
We could.
That'd be cool. Okay, so here's the thing. When we were having this conversation and you were, pretty much expressed just what you said.
Right.
I said that, look, what I think the problem is is that we have to be very, very careful because we are anti-imperialists.
Right.
We do not support the United States of America and its imperialist hegemony in the world. We do not support the warmongering and the propaganda against Russia and China that comes out of the United States.
Right.
And we have to be careful that in criticizing the actions of some Russian actors, some Chinese actors in some places on the continent, that we're not towing the U.S. imperialist party line against Russia
no doubt.
and China,
I agree
right?
with that, no doubt.
So that is like the tension, right? That I think, and I feel, and honestly, y'all, this was not like we saw somebody else's video, because I think somebody mentioned that Black Myths did a show on this a little bit earlier. We haven't had time to watch anybody's videos today in between work and stuff.
Yeah, but my point being is that, you know, it's like talking about Cardi B. You can find 1,000 videos on YouTube talking about Cardi B, and they ain't all seeing each other's videos.
But
it's just a topic.
But my point is that this is an example, I think, of people radicals pretty much think along the same lines. Right. We just get to the same place from different...
Great minds think alike.
That we do. And I think we do focus on the same things. We just come at things from a different perspective. And I think we're here to tell you that that's okay. It's okay. We don't all have to agree on every little thing in this movement for liberation for our people. We do have to have unity of purpose, and we have to be very clear about our ideology. And I think this is what trips us up in this discussion about whether Russia and China are imperialists or colonialists, colonizers in Africa. So here's the article that I think that the first one that we saw that was pretty interesting, that got us to actually be like, this is interesting. So there is this, let's see, where is it? All the way down. Which one is that? The little icon. There we go. So we saw this article that talks about Russia's Wagner Group. I'm guessing that's how it's pronounced, because the Russians.
Yeah,
I don't think, do they have W's in Cyrillic?
Well, it sounds like a German group, right? Wagner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't have Q's in Cyrillic.
I have nothing. We have to ask Condoleezza Rice, because she's the Russian expert and Russian language expert. So, you know, I don't know anything about Russian.
I do know that I absolutely know they don't have Q's in Cyrillic, because I work for Sputnik Radio, and they spelled my name Lukman, because they don't have Q's.
Because that's all we have.
Because we have no Q's.
We have no Q's. That's all we got.
So anyway, this article talks about a Russian private military company operating in Africa. They are deployed in Africa, and this source.
And they tell you all the countries now.
Yeah, they are in Libya. They are
Angola, Madagascar.
they are in Central Africa.
Mozambique.
They are in the Sudan.
Yep.
They are in Mozambique. There's a little infographic here.
Now they're private now. They're a private. They have nothing to do allegedly with the Russian military. Like, this is like the Russia's version of Blackwater.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we looked at this article, and this article is dated what's that? March 5th, 2021. Now this group of folks, this private military, whatever it is from Russia, this private military contractor group from Russia, they may very well have left some of these areas by now. Mm-hmm. But still, look, let's be honest here. Should we look at a Russian private military contractor that is deployed anywhere on the continent of Africa and say, well, that's not a big deal because Russia, we know that Russia are targets of U.S. imperialism, but we see American private contractors like Blackwater on the continent and we cry foul. Do you see what I mean?
That's right, exactly. I mean, and why make fish of one and foul of the other? You know, so we talk about AFRICOM, and we're going to get into that. Mm-hmm. But again, you're right. You have Blackwater, and we know, you know, the crimes and sins of Blackwater and their involvement in Africa and other places. Mm-hmm. But now you have the Russian version of Blackwater, private militia group, mercenaries, and operating on African soil. It was Wagner that has been accused of a civilian deaths in Mozambique.
Right. And I was grinning a little bit because when you said Wagner, you know, I heard the what is it? The Cry of the Valkyries.
That's still in my head. That's still in my head. You know, it's like right now I'm thinking of Valkyrie. You know,
it's just so. I'm so sorry. We're sorry. We're trying to have a serious conversation, but this is how the Luqmans roll. So. I think this is the tension that people have. And this is the difficulty people have where they feel like they have to choose, right? They have to choose whether they demonize Russia or they defend Russia.
And you're right. And this is why we brought this discussion, because it is in a lot of our circles, and I'm sure that it's not intentional, but in a lot of our circles, like, wow, if I say something bad about what China's doing, that's somehow affirming something about the United States. Or if I say something that's negative that the Russians are doing on the continent, somehow I'm playing into the propaganda against the Russians that the United States and the West is doing.
Right.
No. Dr. Marimba Annie, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things that I love that she and others would always say is that as far as we go, because see, for us to fall into that type of thinking of the either or when it comes to China, Russia, and America and the West, that's still, to me, developing a worldview that's not African.
I think that's so.
If I have an African worldview, then I'm not saddled by whether I see the wrong that the Russians are doing on the continent or Chinese are doing on the continent, because again, my worldview is African. Mm-hmm. So if my worldview is African, my allegiance is to Africa. My allegiance is to the African. My allegiance is for what is best for the African, right. Not what's best for. I don't care if Russia, which isn't a really true communist, Marxist, socialist country anymore. But what I'm saying is that I don't care what their political ideology is, even if it does match mine. Mm-hmm. If it's not beneficial to the African, then I have a problem with that.
Well, what did Dr. Clark say? Convert everything into an instrument of liberation or leave it alone.
Right.
So I have to ask myself, and like for people who are well versed on these issues of imperialism and the contradictions and the tensions. Okay, cool. This discussion.
When you have an African, because I disagree with that. An African worldview is a choice.
Right.
No,
right.
I'm saying it is a choice.
Right.
And the fact that to be drugged down into this either or thing, I think negates the fact that having an African worldview doesn't saddle me with doesn't prevent me from criticizing a nation state's actions on the continent of Africa. I don't care where they come from.
And I think that's true. And I think the issue is that not so much, I don't think, for people in who understand these concepts. I think the bigger problem is for people who really don't understand that, yes, it is possible to be absolutely anti-imperialist and absolutely reject the U.S. narrative about Russia. This Alexei Navalny business, and the United States is going to punish Russia if Alexei Navalny died. Did you notice that this dude went on a hunger strike?
Yeah, no.
Right? And what's it been? A week? 2 weeks? Now he's off of his hunger strike because he what is it? He said he thinks that he achieved some of his goals. Then you have to ask yourself, what was his goal? His goal wasn't to free any political prisoners, not even himself, because he knows he's in jail because he violated his own damn parole with his fraud behind, his convicted of fraud behind. And he's also a right-wing nationalist bigot. who compared Muslims to cockroaches. But his goal was to get the attention of the United States imperialist powers to issue a threat against the Russian government.
Right.
That's what his goal was. So we can absolutely oppose the United States aggression, warmongering, lies, and propaganda against Russia, and at the same time question very validly what these Russian private military contractors are doing in these African nations. Because if we don't question what they're doing, then we might miss an opportunity where, well, no, not opportunity. We might miss our obligation to stand up for African people against, okay, fine, it's not imperialism what the Russian private military contractors are doing. Because this is where people get tripped up. They want to call it imperialism. It's not. But it is an unequal relationship between whoever put these Russian contractors in these countries and for whatever reason, and it is harmful. Their presence has been harmful to African people.
These nation states are coming into Africa from a position of strength.
Right.
And so this is the point. I think that we spend too much time debating the internal politics of nations that we have no business that has no business that has nothing to do with us. Like I said, I could care less about Alex Navalny. Yeah, I could care less about him. I could care less about what he's trying to achieve or anything like that. Again, my focus is on the African politics and where that's heading. I don't care whether China, which we know again, but again, I have to keep on saying I'm trying to develop an African worldview. Mm-hmm. And so, and it's not dictated whether China is good or bad. It's not dictated whether Russia is good or bad. It's dictated on what relationship you have with the continent that my ancestors come from, that I am rooted there through DNA. So, so I don't have any personal like or dislike for the Chinese or for Russia or anything. Because, we have stories here where nobody's perfect. And we're going to show stories where they're dropping the ball in Africa. Maybe not as bad. Well, we know not as bad as AFRICOM and all that stuff. Right. But I can't stand against American militarism on the continent and not stand against anybody else's militarism on the continent.
True.
Because they're not there to protect Africa. They're not there to protect the African. They're there so they can secure their piece of the pie. You know what I mean? And we need to start being honest about that. We need to start calling it out. And we need to not be afraid to recognize it for what it is. Okay, United States got all these bases, but we've been clear in this movement about how we feel against American militarism. Right? What we're not being honest with is the militarism. We're going to show a chart where every foreign military is in Africa.
Pretty much. Right? Yep.
And that we don't even talk about. Why are they there? You know what I mean? And see, that's the thing. Why are they there? I can't be so blinded by my disgust for American politics that I ain't paying attention to what's going on over here either.
Right. The rest of the world.
There you go.
And okay, so here's the thing. I'm going to push back a little bit. Well, not push back because that's your opinion.
I'm used to it.
Oh, hush up.
I'm used to it.
You like it when I push you.
Yeah, but this is why we have discussion. But I'm used to being pushed on.
So okay, so I'm gonna detract a little bit because I do think it's important to point out the points of solidarity that countries like Russia and China have had in the struggle for African liberation. Right? I think that is important. And I think this is also where those of us leftists who are anti-imperialists don't want to criticize these countries for their actions. And I think it's a legitimate hesitation because the history is important. Because remember, and I had to have this up because I can never keep them all straight. I'm so sorry. But we have to remember that Russia was pivotal and their support with, arms, soldiers, material support in the liberation struggles of several African nations in their struggle for independence. And this was after the October Revolution of 1917, right? So Russia, or the Soviet Union at the time, was pivotal in supporting a liberation movements in Angola, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Namibia, South Africa, and we still, don't even know the complete history of their assistance in those struggles. But we do know that countries like the USSR and China did lend support, material support, and ideological support to African nations' liberation struggles.
Sure. And then Russia had in their constitution, the first modern constitution outside of Haiti, the first constitution on the European sphere of outlawing racial discrimination.
Right. It was
So I mean, nobody's. I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, and I only say that because I think for me, I always tend to kind of advocate for the people who don't know how to articulate what it is that they are confused about. Because I always have to remind myself of how silly I was when I was confronted with these contradictions and thinking, well, the United States government said, and having people tell me, why would you trust those people? This is where the United States government lied about this and 38,000 other things. So I try to remember, like we started the discussion with, that, there are people who are probably thinking, well, look, what about, Russia did help African nations with liberation. I'm just letting you know that's true. You're absolutely right. They did. But that's not a reason not to be very honest about the role that they may be playing in some instances on the continent that, what did Dr. Clark say? Don't convert into an instrument of liberation for our people. And that's the key. I think we can still and always, and we have to still and always, condemn the United States for its warmongering, imperialist hegemony and propaganda against Russia and China and every other anti-imperialist country that challenges and opposes the United States. That's our responsibility. If we claim to be anti-imperialist, we better be doing that every day. At the same time, like you said, our concern also has to be our concern must be what is best for Africa. Because until Africa is free, none of us will be free. And if that's not our focus, then we have to stop saying that.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So yeah, the fact that there are Russian mercenaries in African countries doing horrible things, just like American mercenaries are, that does not negate Russia's commitment to African liberation struggles. And I don't even think it's a condemnation or a judgment on, some people within Russia who are still committed to Marxism. This is, we have to understand that Russia is not the USSR anymore. And I mean, why is that important though, for people who may not get why Russia not being the USSR anymore is important?
Well, I don't know what point you're trying to make, but what I'm saying is that I get what you're saying about that, about the past actions of Russia when it came to assisting. We know through Cuba, that's one example, that the Cubans received a lot of their arms from the Soviet Union, which found its way into the liberation struggles in Africa. Right. And this is an extreme example. So, there has been other instances where Africa has benefited. World War II. I mean, the Nazis basically, through their brutal beating of Britain, helped to facilitate what would loosen the grips of British imperialism on Africa and India and all this other kind of stuff, and the fact that Roosevelt told Churchill, which was a very major contention between them, that Roosevelt said, "Oh yeah, we'll help you, but you're not getting those colonies back." Right. You know what I mean? So that was another thing. But no, I agree with you on that. I just think that again that I have to go with Dr. Clark. We have no friends. It's to me, I think we waste a lot of time trying to find out who's the good guy and who's the bad guy.
Yeah.
I can't be part of like I said against militarism when it comes to the United States, and then turn a blind eye to militarism being set up by the Russians or by the Chinese or by Japan. Why the fuck is Japan there?
Exactly.
I mean, so it's like, Japan, they're supposed to be a pacifist nation, but they're there too.
But they're there too.
Right. So we understand what it is. And what we understand is what Dr. Clark said in that same video. It wasn't in the clip, but it was part of the same speech. When Dr. Clark said Africa is, and will always be the prize.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So, so they're not setting bases up there because they care about Africans. They're not. The Russians aren't setting up a base in the Sudan because they want to make sure that the Sudanese have the right to self-determination and stuff. No, look, we're running into a resource scarce world, and Africa still got a basket full. You know what I mean?
A few baskets full.
So so that's people I hear all the time. People saying, "Oh, we don't have time to do this, and we don't have time." Well, what we don't have time to do is not tie your. There's a saying in the Middle East that says, or Africa, but there's a saying that says, "Believe in God, but tie your camel." Tie your camel, man. Don't sit up there and act. While all of this focus is on what America and the focus should be on what the United States is doing. Trust me, they're the most destructive force in the world
on the planet.
Right. But at the same time, I said my allegiance is to the African. And so when it comes to African labor, the labor struggle in Africa, if the Chinese are there exploiting labor, then they need to be called out on that. If the Chinese are there leaving, if the Chinese are there and somehow, like in Mozambique, we talked about that with extracting the resources.
Right.
If China is part of those other groups that's extracting resources and people are suffering, then they all need to be called out on that. I'm not going to put China over here and say that, well, you're not imperialist, so so you must have different intentions. No, I can only go by what I see, and the people on the ground can only go by what they see. Your intentions be damned. You know what I mean? Your intentions be damned. Nobody knows, and it shouldn't be on us to try to weigh out what a government's intentions are. That's not my business. I don't care. Well, the thing of it is that how is that affecting? What does that mean for life of the African on the ground? Right. So as an African in the diaspora, that's where my politics has to be. That everything has to be about that. It can't be about like those old Cold War shifting alliances where you're right. You know what I'm saying? Right. Those old Cold War shifting alliances where, okay, the United States ain't fucking with me, so I'm going to the Soviet Union, right. and I'm, and so through us or through the African, as they're doing now with the proxy armies that's fighting each other, and they're being armed by these powers, you're still being used, whether it's by the Soviet Union or because in the end, all they're doing is trying to, as somebody said in the chat, is look out for their own national interest. So we're just pawns. So the politics has to develop to the point where we're not pawns anymore.
Right.
And that's where the self-determination come in at. I think that too many of our conversations fall into this trap of these old Cold War alliances, is that, well, they're a better friend to me than they are over there. Okay, that's fine. But you may be a better friend to me than them over there, but I got my eye on you too.
Right, because we keep going back to this, and you said self-determination like 3 or 4 times. We keep going back to what Dr. John Henrik Clark said. That's what he was talking about. Right. Convert everything into an instrument of liberation or leave it alone. So,
but just one more point I add is that there are, and most of these are Western powers, but Africans are being prevented from building cars.
Mhm.
They're prevented from building a lot of these things. And we know that. I mean, we were just talking about Haiti.
Right,
and how Haiti's
right.
not allowed to develop their own agriculture.
Mhm.
And, and this stuff is happening in Nigeria.
Mhm.
It's happening all throughout the continent.
Right.
And, where you got these monopolistic capitalist companies
Mhm.
that have joined together with the IMF and the World Banks and all these other capitalist institutions to keep Africa in a subservient position. So it was who when we were talking to Milton,
Mhm.
and we were talking about I forget the nations, but the nation I think it was it Ghana, but it was one of the nations that refused to export because they would send. Oh, it was about the cocoa.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then you're going to export it, send it up there to refine it and do whatever you want, and they're going to sell it back to them.
Yeah, the Swiss were going to sell it back to them.
Well, America went to war when that was done to them.
That's right. So, I mean, when we look at these issues of who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, that we can't. You know what? I'm glad that you cut. Now that I think about what you said, that Cold War mentality, that's exactly the way the Cold War was framed.
Course,
these people are the bad guys over here, and the United States and its allies are the good guys. But the point I was trying to make
it's the lesser of the two evils.
It's the lesser of the two evils. But the point I was trying to make about, Russia today not being the USSR of yesterday was the way the USSR collapsed and how capitalism has become such a huge part of what used to be a Marxist government.
Right.
And that this is a criticism that I have also of China. No, China is not a capitalist nation. Let's make this clear. Neither Russia nor China are imperialist in what they're doing in the United States. On the continent of Africa. The argument neither are either country colonizing Africa. I don't think that's true either. If the argument that people are making to claim that they are is that they are exploiting African people, that's not good enough. That really isn't good enough, because I think we have to remember when we talk about the military presence of these countries on the continent, why are they there? Because you asked a great question. Why the fuck is Japan?
Why is Japan there?
Why do they have a military presence?
Right.
On the continent.
Whereas Japan's constitution says that they're only supposed to be for defense only. Their military is defense only. Their military is called the Japanese Defense Force.
Right.
So who are you defending against Africa? Right.
Who's going after Japan now?
That's my point.
So we have to start asking questions beyond are these other countries doing the same thing as the United States? Listen, there is no other country on this planet that is doing the same thing anywhere else in the world that the United States is doing. Definitely not on the continent. And this is why, just real quick, I just want to show you this little graphic, one of the little graphics.
And we've covered a lot of this with Black Alliance for Peace.
Oh my gosh!
This is a major thing that we talk about.
And this is where AFRICOM comes into play. And you probably can't see that real well. Let me.
But we can put the link in the chat.
Yeah, we're definitely going to put the link in the chat. Ooh, that's way too big. So this is actually these are a couple of maps that are from an Intercept article from just last year. And the article is written by Nick Turse, and they talk about Pentagon's own map. That this is the map that the Pentagon has of U.S. bases in Africa. The Pentagon always claims they have a light footprint in Africa. Well, no, they don't. They do not. This is what they consider light, and this isn't even entirely accurate. All right, and what you really have to do is combine both of these maps together, because if you notice, these are two different operations. This is enduring footprint, meaning that these bases are permanent, and these are the non-enduring footprint bases, meaning they're temporary. They may stay, they may not.
But it sounds like the way the United States the way they name their military assault, Operation Enduring Footprint.
Oh yeah, yeah, and this is not even a completely accurate map. That's not a completely accurate map of all of the U.S. Involvement in Africa, because we're not just talking about bases, which the U.S. has more of on the continent than any other country in the world, but we're also talking about military operations,
Right.
training, drone bases,
Right.
and private contractors, which I don't even know if there's ever a map of those.
Now I know we're at 6:32, so I want to speed up to a couple other stories, but I think Sounds of Elsewhere, saying Elsewhere, in the chat.
Oh, where's this?
Well, anyway, they mentioned that how, and they asked the question, like, Sounds of Saying Elsewhere, like, how is China not capitalist?
China is not capitalist because, what is it, 70% of the corporations in China are owned by the state. So China, yes, does have aspects of capitalism in their economy. However, China is not like the United States in that corporations control the government. Basically, that's what's going on here in the United States.
Well, that's what Richard White said. It's state-controlled capitalism.
Right. So it is not.
It's just not a private company.
It's not a private company, which means if the state controls the company, then that means the state controls the profits. And if the state controls the profits, then that means the profits go to programs that the state wants to go to for the people, which is how China lifted 800 million people out of poverty. I mean, private corporations in this country probably make more money than Chinese corporations do.
Yeah, but I kind of lean on the side that it is capitalism. It's just not the capitalism that's practiced here, which is mostly private. But I do think I would say that it's state-sponsored capitalism because the mechanisms are the same. The machinations are the same. It's just that instead of it being different CEOs and boards and all this other kind of stuff privately owned, it's just that the state is capitalist. China, like Russia, they're hybrids. Hybrids of capitalist and socialist ideology. That you see in Russia too. I mean, Russia, I think to me, Russia is totally capitalist. But China, for it's state capitalism. I don't think it's less capitalist. I don't think it's any less capitalist because the state is doing it.
Well, I think there is a distinction. I do think there is a distinction between the state controlling corporations and private corporations in the United States having no state control or regulation at all, because we know what that is like here in the United States. People who live in this country get no benefit whatsoever from the massive profits that Amazon makes. But Amazon.
But you still have in China, and I don't want to get off on this, but you still have in China the massive wealth gap that you're seeing over here.
Yes, that is true.
And you have a lot. So I mean, what is driving that? You still have this massive wealth gap that's growing. You're having the same class.
And this does not mean that there are no contradictions within China's and Russia's non-purely capitalist societies. Because this is the thing, there is no purely socialist country on the planet.
Right.
So I mean, even this is a discussion that's like, why? I mean, there's no purely socialist country on the planet. There are plenty of purely capitalist countries on the planet that prove that capitalism does not work without serious constraints and intervention by the state.
But it also shows, if you really want to look why socialist countries adopt some capitalist methods, is because of the power that these world banks have on the places where, the way that the global economy is controlled by capitalists. So it is controlled by capitalists. Russia doesn't control it.
Can I finish my?
Well, what I'm saying is that the capitalists control mainly the global economy. The global economy is integrated. So if you can sanction Russia and sanction people in Russia or sanction people in China and all those other things, I mean, if they weren't connected to the economic grid, then those sanctions wouldn't mean anything.
I do not disagree that the world economy is run by capitalists. That is the whole point of a revolution being needed to end the capitalist control of the world economy and the capitalist grip on the world economy. Because the world doesn't have to exist in which one country's or one block of countries' economy dictates what other countries do. So do you see what I mean? So yes, it's absolutely true that capitalist countries and capitalism dictates the world economies. Well, that's why imperialism and colonialism are problems.
Well, right. I know that.
Right. So this is what I'm saying.
But again, what I'm saying is the fact that, well, I don't want to be bogged down. Like I said, time is short. But what I'm saying is, again, I am not pro China. I'm pro African.
Right.
So so I'm not. I don't have a dog in that fight. What my thing is that I'm pro African, and so anyway, that's up for debate. I feel that China is capitalist in some ways. Like I said, 70% of their companies are owned by the state.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But you're still having the same fallout in China. Maybe not as rapid, maybe not as definitely not as deep. But you still have the same wealth gaps. You still have the same problems with labor. You still have the same problems that we witness in a lot of capitalist countries.
I think that is true. And I think I agree with that. And we did say that China does have some aspects of purely capitalist companies. 70% of the companies are owned and controlled by the state. And China even admits, yes, they have a problem with wealth inequality. What's the difference between the way China is handling it and the way the United States is handling it? Is that China is actually trying to address it. And the United States is like, fuck you, imperialism and, American exceptionalism and rugged individualism and you're poor because you're lazy and it's your fault. So yeah, I think this is one of those things where, it always goes into a deeper, longer discussion about what countries are and are not, but that can detract from the issue, which is that what we started with, we convert everything into an instrument of liberation or we leave it alone.
What is the African doing? Let's talk about them.
So what is the African doing?
Let's talk about what the African's doing.
That is an instrument of liberation for them, which, I was actually very surprised to learn this. There it is. Because this has actually been going on for quite a while. And it just blows my mind.
Yeah, that to me, and I just discovered that this morning. That's why we included it in the show.
Yeah, but I think this is a very important point to make about why we need to be advocates for Africans, for Africa, and not. Yes, we critique U.S. imperialism and the targets of U.S. imperialism. And before we go, we do have to show you that article with the list of bases all in military presence, all these countries in Africa, because there's a reason for that we need to get to. But this is why we need to focus our attention on liberating Africa. Apparently the Sahara Desert is expanding, because climate change, right?
Well, part of climate change and part of it is, over farming.
Oh, right. Over farming. So, a 5,000-mile living wall could hold back the world's largest desert. And this is actually reported in CNN, which I'm surprised that it was reported in CNN. But you first saw it, I think, in Al Jazeera.
Al Jazeera this morning. Yeah.
So apparently, this project to build a green wall initiative to plant enough greenery.
Yeah. Different. They said different types of greenery.
An entire ecosystem to hold back the expansion of the Sahara. This project has been going on since 2007 on the continent. Have you heard about it? I had not heard about it.
I definitely didn't hear about it.
Look at this. This is the plan, to build a wall of green, all different species and types of plants from one coast to the other, from Senegal to Ethiopia.
Now, when this is done, experts say that this would be the largest human-made structure in human history.
The largest, bigger even than the Great Wall of China.
Yeah, the Great Wall ain't gonna have nothing on that.
No. Nothing. And this is the
You'll
kind
be able
of,
to see this from space.
So if this is completed, not only will this be the greatest, the largest, greatest man-made structure ever built on, the planet,
human made.
The human made, not only will it hold back the expansion of the Sahara Desert, it may even, what's the word there? Reforest?
Reforest. It will definitely serve to rejuvenate ecosystems. It will just be a domino effect. Wildlife will come back.
Exactly.
So if they do this right, and the governments that that this green wall is going through, if they have a comprehensive plan on maintaining it and keeping up with this could transform Africa in ways that we have never seen. Because what makes this so important is that we're losing the Amazon.
Yes.
Yes. So we're losing the Amazon, and so once again, here are the Africans coming to rescue the world once again. And scientists have already said that one of the ways of combating climate change is one of the natural ways is to plant trees. They say like 2 trillion trees planted around the world would reduce so much emissions up in the
greenhouse gases.
Right.
So you've got a continent on which, let me just hop over to here. I hope you can see that. So you've got a continent on which, looks like it didn't. Let me hop over here. You've got a continent on which the world gets what percentage of resources? 40% of the entire world's resources can be found on the continent?
Oh, more than that.
Probably more than that.
Depending on what you're looking for.
That's true. Yeah. So varying degrees. Everybody knows that Africa is rich in everything that everyone in the world wants and needs. Not everybody.
But like Dr. Clark said, but nobody wants to pay for it.
Not everybody wants to pay for it. The feather in the cap for China is that they are making trade deals and doing, expanding the Belt and Road Initiative, which benefit Africa. So Africa does get some benefit. But listen, please understand that every country that has a military presence in Africa are doing 2 things. They are trying to get a piece of some of those resources that they need, that they can't get in their countries, or that they're running out of, or that climate change is going to threaten access to.
Well, what did Kamala Harris say? The next wars will be fought over water.
Over water.
Right. You can't drink oil.
That exactly. So that's one thing that all of these countries are doing. The other thing that countries like Russia and China in particular are doing is that they're using Africa as geopolitical strategic bases of operation to challenge the United States. That's what this is also about.
Of course, yeah.
So when we look at, this is from The Conversation from September 2020. They asked the question, why foreign countries are scrambling to set up bases in Africa. And they have this list of all of these countries that I was not even aware of. The U.S. has 7,000 military personnel on rotational deployment, and that's in addition to 2,000 soldiers in training in 40 African countries. France has military forces. Let's see. China has 1 overseas military base in Djibouti. Now, here's the question. Are China imperialists like the United States? No, they're not. China is not building a base. They didn't build a base in Djibouti to steal Africa's resources. They built a base in Djibouti because the United States has bases in 40 countries in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
That's why China built a base in Djibouti. And yes, trade, for trade also. So let's see. French, Italian, Spanish, German, Japanese bases. India has a naval presence in Africa. Turkey joined the International Counter-Piracy Task Force off the Somalia coast. The UAE has a military base in Eritrea. It's been there since 2014. We're going to drop this in the chat for you. Whew. So, I don't know if this conversation was helpful to any of you.
I mean, one of these days we're going to have to talk about, we don't have the time now, but one of these days we got to talk about the complicity of the Gulf Arab states when it comes to the destabilization of Africa. Mm-hmm. Because when we opened up the show, that was one of the points that Dr. Clark made, was about the Islamic invasion and the way that that the Arabs destabilized a lot of the northern kingdoms in Africa. So I mean, they kicked the Romans out, but then they set up their own imperialist ventures, and now all of these groups like Boko Haram and El Shabaab and even these so-called ISIL groups that's in Libya and the Sahel, these guys ain't got jobs.
Right.
They're getting their funding from these people. So, we have to talk about that too. We spend a lot of time on China, Russia, America, but these Arab Gulf states, which is even more dangerous because we're talking about an ideological, not only but a vicious ideological conquest that's happening through religion. And the manipulation of religious ideas that is being backed by these rich Saudi Gulf kingdoms.
Yeah, I mean, when we discuss all of the ways other countries around the world are exploiting Africa, all of the ways so many other countries are, looting Africa, taking advantage of Africa. And I think that ultimately the way we approach the conversation can't be, well, are these countries doing what the United States is doing? That can't be the beginning and the end of the conversation, because if we keep the conversation there, that these countries and what they're doing on the continent isn't a problem because they're not imperialist or they're not colonial colonizers like the United States and France and Britain and Portugal, then we miss all of the other ways that Africans stay losing with the ways other countries are involved on the continent. So, we didn't even get to the Chinese babies that are left. The Chinese workers who are impregnating African women and leaving them and the babies, leaving those mothers to fend for themselves. And look, I don't care whether China is capitalist or socialist or Marxist or imperialist or not. As someone who's aligned with the African people, I want to know who's going to do something about that.
Exactly.
Because the Africans want to know who's going to do something about that. So that's where my allegiance lies. So that's what we had to say on the issue.
Well, we're out of time, 6:51, and we want to make sure that we're not standing in the way of Dr. CBS. So we thank you for joining us. And hey, look, we'll see you on the Tuesday Remix Show. Share this with share the stream and tomorrow, the Waters of Healing.
Yes.
With me and my co-host Ray Wilkerson, and we're going to discuss some of the obstacles that Black men face, the earliest obstacles that Black men face, and what we can do about that. So we thank you for joining us here.
Thank you.
And if you haven't liked it, like it all, like the stream, and we'll catch you in the whirlwind. Doc CBS coming up.
Peace.
So Friday continues.
I had them all long before I dial up. How they claiming they on top and I'm a mile up. I had them online before I dial up. How they claiming they on top and I'm a mile up. I know the wall's closing in, but don't you dare give up now. Poe believed in me, pull up, threw some bucks down. Todd told the valet, pull the truck round. Push the line up that we drew it, it's just us now. Would you believe me if I told you my granny told me she prayed this? Then booked the surgery just to pull me out of the basement. Right back where I started, nothing to show for a facelift. Got pushed playing Walter White and Davis, never felt so dangerous. The type of power they can't quantify. And name the best from my region, you gotta utter mine. Think of who really putting on, you never come to mind. Rapping like your Spotify, tap you rappers compromise. Yeah, no need to panic, just paint the canvas. If you can feel the static, you're too close, find your balance. Embed the revolution for their prohibition bandwidth. Blood trickle from the leaders he was planning. I had them all online before I dialed up.